Love is one of the most beautiful and confusing things we ever experience. It lifts us up, makes us vulnerable, and sometimes, just sometimes, it breaks our hearts. But here's the true thing: a high-value woman doesn't let love define her worth, and she never lets rejection shake her foundation. A high-value woman doesn't chase love. She invites it. She understands that love isn't about chasing someone down or trying to convince them of her worth. She's not performing, adjusting, or molding herself into a version she thinks someone else will accept. She knows that true love flows into her life when she is already whole, not when she's desperately seeking someone to complete her. Instead of seeking validation, she leads with authenticity. She treats herself with the same respect she wants from others, and by doing so, she naturally attracts relationships that reflect that same value. When love shows up, she welcomes it, but never at the cost of her self-respect. She sets the tone for how she wants to be treated through her energy and her boundaries. She isn't afraid to walk away when something doesn't align. And when rejection happens, she doesn't crumble. She doesn't internalize someone else's indecision or confusion as a reflection of her own value. She sees rejection as redirection, not a personal failure. Even when it hurts, she holds herself with grace and dignity, walking away from situations that no longer serve her without bitterness. She also doesn't give away her power by waiting on closure or explanations from someone who's already chosen to leave. She gives herself that closure. She processes the pain, learns from it, and then lets go. Her identity isn't tied to whether a relationship worked out. She's rooted in a much deeper sense of self, one that isn't easily shaken. Her life is full, with or without a partner. She pours into her passions, her friendships, her growth. Love is part of her life, not her entire life, and that's what makes her presence so magnetic. And most importantly, she never lets heartbreak make her hard. She doesn't shut down or become bitter. Instead, she becomes wiser. She understands that not every ending is a loss. It's often the clearing for something better. Her heart stays open, but smarter, more grounded, and more intentional. Because she knows her worth isn't something someone else gets to decide. It's something she lives by, even when no one is watching. That's what makes her high value. Not perfection, but her quiet strength, her emotional maturity, and the grace with which she moves through love and loss. A high value woman sets the tone for how she wants to be treated from the very beginning. She doesn't wait for someone else to define the dynamic or test the waters to see what she'll tolerate. Instead, she communicates her standards through her presence, her choices, and the way she carries herself. There's no need for ultimatums or dramatic speeches. People learn how to treat her by observing how she treats herself. She has a quiet confidence in her energy that naturally filters out what doesn't align. She doesn't need to beg for respect or attention because her boundaries are already clear. When someone crosses a line or shows inconsistency, she doesn't argue or try to convince them to act differently. She simply adjusts her distance. Her self-respect does the talking. She understands that people often respond to what we allow, so she makes sure what she allows reflects her inner value, her time, her energy, her affection. All of it is offered thoughtfully, not handed out freely to those who haven't earned it. This kind of presence creates a different level of connection. It's not based on fear or people-pleasing. It's rooted in mutual respect. She doesn't need to be dominant or cold to gain respect. She just needs to be consistent in honoring her own standards, the apology has been. And when someone can't meet her there, she doesn't take it personally. She knows that walking away from what's not right for her is actually an act of love toward herself, not a sign of failure. Ultimately, she's not trying to control others. She's choosing to lead her life from a place of clarity and self-worth. That's what sets the tone. Not perfection, not control, but the decision to consistently align her actions with her values. That alignment becomes her protection and her power. People either rise to meet her or fall away, and either outcome is perfectly fine with her. A high-value woman understands that love isn't something you earn by putting on a performance. She doesn't feel the need to impress someone into liking her or mold herself into what she thinks they want. Instead, she shows up as she is, real, honest, and grounded. She values connection that comes from authenticity, not one built on pretending to be someone she's not. When she meets someone new, she doesn't lead with her accomplishments, her looks, or how agreeable she can be. She leads with her truth. She knows that if someone only sticks around because of who she pretended to be, then it's not real love. It's an illusion. So she resists the urge to over-explain, overgive, or overcompensate just to be chosen. She'd rather be alone and at peace stay in something where she has to constantly prove her worth. Her mindset is simply, has been, if I have to perform for love, then it's not love. It's a job interview, and I'm not applying. Real connection doesn't ask her to shrink, shift, or overextend. When someone appreciates her for who she genuinely is, that's when she allows deeper access to her world. She knows how to distinguish attention from intention. She doesn't get caught up in flattery or surface-level attraction. She looks for effort, emotional presence, and consistency, because for her, true intimacy is built on a foundation of honesty, not effort meant to impress. She can sense the difference between being admired and being truly understood, and she chooses the latter every time. At her core, she believes that love should feel like freedom, not pressure, and she gives others the same freedom she gives herself. To be real, to be human, to be imperfect. She's not trying to be the most likable person in the room. She's trying to be the most herself in every room, because she knows that the right person will love her not in spite of her truth, but because of it, has been. And that's the only kind of connection she's willing to invest in. A high-value woman doesn't fear rejection because she understands that it's not a reflection of her worth. When someone doesn't choose her, she doesn't fall apart or start questioning everything about herself. She doesn't obsess over what she could have done differently or chase after someone who has clearly made a choice to walk away. Instead, she pauses, acknowledges the pain, and then reminds herself that her value isn't up for negotiation. She knows that one person's inability to see her worth doesn't mean it isn't there. Rather than take rejection personally, she respects it. She accepts that not every connection is meant to last, and that sometimes people leave not because something is wrong with her, but because they are not the right match. She doesn't need to twist herself into someone else's ideal to feel loved. If a person walks away, she lets them. She trusts that rejection is not punishment. It's protection. It's a sign that someone or someone aligned with her values and needs is waiting ahead. She doesn't let rejection close her heart or make her bitter. Instead, she chooses to grow from it. She reflects, she learns, and she uses the experience to become more grounded in who she is. She might cry, she might feel disappointed, but she doesn't let that temporary emotion define her self-image. She allows herself to feel, but she never lets pain rewrite the truth of her worth. She doesn't chase after clarity from others when she can give it to herself through acceptance. In the end, she walks away with grace. She doesn't need to seek revenge, play games, or prove anything to anyone. Her peace comes from knowing that she showed up honestly, loved deeply, and stayed true to herself. And even if things didn't work out, she believes that her life will keep moving forward in a direction that honors her. She understands that rejection is never the end of her story. It's just a redirection to something more meaningful and more reciprocal and more deserving of the love she gives so freely. A high-value woman remains rooted in self-respect, even when her heart is hurting. She doesn't resort to begging for another chance or trying to convince someone to stay. She understands that love cannot be sustained through pleading or proving. If a relationship ends, she chooses to leave with her dignity intact. For her, how she handles the ending is just as important as how she showed up in the beginning. She refuses to let the pain of heartbreak drag her into behavior that goes against her values. She doesn't chase after explanations that won't bring her peace. She might want answers, but she knows that closure doesn't always come from the other person. Sometimes it has to come from within. And so, apology has been, instead of sending one more message or replaying old conversations in her head, she accepts that not everything needs to be understood to be released. Her calm response, because she doesn't care. It's because she cares more about her peace than her pride. She knows that respect for herself must come first, even when emotions are heavy. Rather than holding on tightly to something that's already slipping away, she lets go with grace. She doesn't see walking away as a loss of control, but as a sign of strength. She understands that trying to force love to stay only creates more pain in the long run. Her strength lies in her ability to let go, not out of coldness, but out of wisdom. She chooses herself over the need to be chosen by someone else. That choice, every single time, reinforces her self-worth and her inner calm. She carries herself with quiet confidence, even in her most vulnerable moments. She doesn't gossip about the person who left or seek validation through attention from others. Instead, she takes her time to heal in her own way, surrounded by the things and people that nourish her. She trusts that life has a way of unfolding in her favor when she stays true to herself. And in the end, she doesn't let the ending define her. Instead, she uses it as a reminder of the strength, grace, and self-respect she holds within. A high-value woman does not take someone else's distance or confusion as a sign that she is lacking. When a man pulls away or becomes inconsistent, her first instinct isn't to blame herself or search for flaws in her behavior. She doesn't automatically assume she did something wrong or that she needs to fix herself to win him back. Instead, she pauses and observes. She recognizes that people sometimes retreat for reasons that have nothing to do with her. Reasons rooted in their own fears, past wounds, or emotional unavailability. She doesn't fall into the trap of overanalyzing every word or moment trying to decode what went wrong. She knows that not all distance is her responsibility to close. When someone becomes distant or unclear, she doesn't chase after clarity from someone who is clearly unsure. Instead, she chooses to hold her ground. She reminds herself that someone else's indecision is not a reflection of her worth. It's simply a reflection of where they are emotionally, and that may not be a place that can hold space for real connection. Rather than shrinking to fit into someone's confusion, she expands into her own clarity. She doesn't beg for reassurance or try to convince someone to choose her. She understands that love should not require convincing. If someone needs space, she gives it without resentment. If someone walks away, she lets them go without clinging. Her identity isn't built around being wanted. It's built around knowing she is valuable with or without external validation. She refuses to make herself small just to hold on to someone who isn't fully present. Even in moments of uncertainty, she chooses peace over panic. She trusts that whatever is meant for her won't have to be chased or constantly questioned. Her self-worth isn't shaken by someone's inability to commit or communicate clearly. She knows how to stay calm in emotional storms because she's anchored in herself. And while she may care deeply, as she never sacrifices her emotional well-being for the comfort of someone who doesn't yet know how to show up fully. She lets people figure themselves out while continuing to stand fully in her own truth. A high-value woman doesn't rely on someone else to give her closure. She understands that waiting for the perfect explanation or a sincere apology can keep her stuck in a place of pain. She may want to understand why things ended the way they did, but she doesn't make her healing dependent on answers that may never come. Instead, she chooses to sit with her emotions honestly. She allows herself to feel the sadness, the disappointment, even the confusion, but she doesn't allow those feelings to control her or define her sense of self. Rather than waiting on someone who hurt her to bring peace, she creates that peace within herself. She reflects on what the relationship taught her and what patterns she may need to release. She looks at the experience with compassion, not only for the other person, but for herself as well. She doesn't try to numb the pain or rush through it. She gives herself the grace to grieve fully and in her own time. And through that process, she begins to reclaim her emotional power piece by piece. She tells herself the truth that so many struggle to accept. This chapter is over, but her story isn't. She knows that endings are not always tidy, and closure doesn't always come wrapped in understanding. Sometimes, closure is a decision, a quiet but powerful moment where she chooses to move forward, even without all the pieces fitting together. She honors the love she gave and the effort she made, and then she chooses to let go. Not because it didn't matter, but because holding on any longer would mean losing herself. In choosing her own closure, she releases the need for validation or resolution from anyone else. She stops replaying the past and instead begins rewriting her future. She knows that she is allowed to begin again, even with a heart that's still healing. Her strength is not in pretending she was never hurt, but in refusing to let that hurt keep her from growing. She closes the chapter with grace, knowing that what's ahead of her holds far more promise than what she's leaving behind. A high-value woman doesn't center her entire life around love or a romantic relationship. While she deeply values love and connection, she never lets it consume her identity. She has a full life, one that includes friendships, family, passions, and personal goals. Her happiness isn't dependent on whether or not she is in a relationship, because she finds meaning and purpose in many areas of her life. Love is something she welcomes, but it's not something she depends on to feel whole. She understands that romantic love is only one type of connection, and she invests just as much care into her other relationships. She makes time for the people who uplift her, the hobbies that bring her joy, and the goals that keep her inspired. This balance gives her a sense of stability and self-assurance because she isn't waiting for someone to come along and complete her. She's already living fully, and that kind of energy draws people in effortlessly. When she is in a relationship, she maintains her independence. She doesn't abandon her routine, her dreams, or her boundaries to make room for someone else. Instead, she makes space in her already fulfilling life for someone who adds value not someone who becomes the center of her universe. She knows that when love becomes her only source of happiness, it creates pressure and imbalance. But when love is just one beautiful part of her world, it has room to grow in a healthy and secure way. This mindset makes her deeply magnetic. People are drawn to her energy because she is content, passionate, and confident in her own path. She isn't seeking someone to rescue her from boredom or loneliness. She's looking for someone to share a meaningful life with. And because she values herself and her time so highly, she attracts relationships that reflect that same level of respect and intentionality. Her life is already full, and that fullness is what makes her presence so powerful. A high-value woman never confuses the effort she gave in a relationship with her own worth. She may have poured her heart into loving someone, showing up consistently, and doing her best to make things work. But if it doesn't last, she doesn't see it as a personal failure. She understands that giving her all is a reflection of her character, not a measure of how lovable or valuable she is. Just because someone didn't reciprocate or appreciate her fully doesn't mean her effort was wasted or that she was too much. She knows that her worth isn't determined by someone else's ability to recognize it. Some people simply aren't capable of receiving the kind of love she offers, not because her love is wrong or flawed, but because they aren't ready for it or able to handle it. She doesn't let their limitations become her insecurity. Instead of beating herself up, she stands firm in the knowledge that being a loving, giving person is something to be proud of, not something to regret. Even when it hurts, she doesn't wish she had held back or loved less. She knows that loving fully is brave, and it's a part of who she is. She doesn't allow one person's response to define her future approach to love. She takes the lessons, keeps the wisdom, and continues forward with the same open heart. But with clearer vision, her value remains constant, and she never lets someone else's inability to see it convince her to dim her light. A high-value woman doesn't let heartbreak turn her cold or bitter. Even when she's been hurt, she refuses to shut herself off from the possibility of love. She understands that protecting her heart doesn't mean building walls so high that no one can reach her. Instead, she allows herself to feel the pain, process it, and then heal with the intention of growing, not hardening. She believes that just because one person couldn't handle her heart doesn't mean no one can. She takes the lessons from each experience and uses them to strengthen her emotional wisdom. Rather than jumping into the next connection blindly, she becomes more discerning. She knows what she's willing to tolerate and what no longer aligns with the person she's becoming. But she doesn't let fear or resentment guide her. She still believes in love, but now she believes in it from a place of self-awareness, patience, and clarity. She no longer accepts surface-level affection. She seeks depth, honesty, and consistency. Her heart stays open, but wiser. She approaches new connections with curiosity, not desperation. She no longer tries to prove her worth. She simply shows up as herself and lets time reveal what's real. She doesn't rush, and she doesn't pretend. She allows people to reveal who they are without trying to control the outcome. And through it all, she remains rooted in her truth, knowing that the right love will never require her to lose herself in order to keep it.